There's a strange feeling about driving at night. The world looks the same, but it feels completely different. The empty roads, the orange glow of the streetlights, and the way darkness presses in on both sides. It's quiet, but it never feels peaceful. It feels like you're being watched, even if you're alone. That night, I decided to take the long way home. It was late, almost past midnight, and the city streets were nearly empty. I had just dropped off a friend and didn't feel sleepy yet, so I thought a slow drive through the quieter side roads would help clear my head. The air was warm, the windows were down, and the hum of the engine was the only sound I could hear. For a while, it felt almost relaxing. Empty intersections, long stretches of dark road, and the occasional flicker of a neon sign outside a closed shop. Nothing unusual. But the further I drove, the less familiar the streets became. At first, I didn't even notice. I just kept following the road, assuming I'd recognize something soon. But after 10 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen another car, not even a single headlight behind me. The houses had disappeared too. Now it was just trees on both sides, leaning in close, their branches swaying like arms in the wind. That's when I saw her, a woman, standing on the side of the road. She was facing away from me at first, just standing there under a flickering streetlight that shouldn't even have been there, because the road looked abandoned. Her long hair hung over her shoulders, and she wore a pale dress that reached her ankles. For a moment, I thought she might be lost, or waiting for someone. I slowed down as I got closer, my headlights stretching over her. That's when she turned. Her head turned far too slowly, like it took effort, and when her face finally came into view, my hands froze on the wheel. Her eyes were wide open, staring directly into my headlights, but there was nothing in them. No expression, no reaction, just blank. Her skin looked almost gray, and her mouth hung open as though she was trying to speak, but couldn't. I pressed the gas instinctively and drove past her. My chest tightened, my hands trembling against the steering wheel. For a second, I told myself it was just a tired person, maybe drunk, maybe lost. I tried to convince myself it wasn't anything strange. But when I glanced in the mirror, she wasn't standing under the streetlight anymore. She was in the middle of the road, right where my car had been just seconds ago. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart racing, and kept driving. The road stretched on endlessly, trees whipping past in the dark. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there. 10 minutes later, I saw another figure. This time, it was further down the road, standing perfectly still in the middle of my lane. My stomach dropped. I thought it was her again, but as I drew closer, I realized it was someone else, a man, tall and thin, his clothes torn, his head slightly tilted to one side like his neck couldn't hold it straight. He didn't move when my headlights hit him. He just stared. I swerved into the opposite lane to avoid him, but as I passed, I swear I saw his lips moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. I didn't look back. I couldn't. By now, I just wanted to get out of that road. But no matter how long I drove, there was nothing. No turnoffs, no gas stations, no signs of life. Just the road and the darkness. Then the radio turned on by itself. A low, static-filled hum filled the car speakers. The volume knob didn't work. I twisted it all the way down, but the sound kept growing louder, like a broken signal trying to form words. Through the static, I caught faint whispers. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it felt like they were saying my name. I slammed the radio off completely, but the whispering didn't stop. It was faint now, not through the speakers, through the back seat. I didn't dare look. Every part of me screamed to check the mirror, to make sure nothing was there, but I couldn't move my eyes from the road. My throat was dry, my body stiff with fear. The whispers grew louder, closer, like someone leaning over my shoulder. Finally, I couldn't take it. I flicked my eyes up to the mirror. The back seat was empty. But the window. The back window was covered in handprints, wet, smudged, streaking down the glass as if someone had been dragging their hands across it from the outside. That was it. I floored the accelerator. The engine roared as the speedometer climbed, my heart pounding louder than the car itself. The road seemed endless, but then, out of nowhere, I saw the familiar glow of the highway lights ahead. I burst out of the dark road and onto the main highway like I'd been freed from a nightmare. Cars passed by, streetlights flickered overhead, and just like that, everything felt normal again. I didn't stop until I reached home. When I finally parked and stepped out, my legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand. I forced myself to walk to the back of the car. The handprints were still there, dozens of them, pressed against the trunk, smeared along the windows, some larger, some smaller, as if more than one person had been clinging to the car while I drove. And among them, one stood out. Right in the center of the trunk, clearer than all the others, was a single child's handprint. Small, perfect, and fresh. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the road again, the pale faces, the whispers, and most of all, that small handprint on the trunk. By morning, the handprints had dried into faint brown smears, like old dirt. But the small one, the child's hand, was still clear, almost like it had been pressed there only moments ago. No matter how much I wiped with a cloth, the outline didn't fade. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, maybe I was too tired, but deep down, I knew better. Something had followed me home that night. That evening, I avoided the car completely. I kept the curtains shut and tried to distract myself with the TV. But as night fell, the atmosphere in the house changed. The air felt heavier, still, like everything was holding its breath. Around 11 p.m., just when I was starting to calm down, I heard it, a faint tapping. At first, I thought it was coming from the window, but as I muted the TV and listened carefully, I realized it wasn't the glass. The sound was coming from the driveway, from the car. I didn't want to check. Every instinct told me to stay inside, lock the doors, and pretend I heard nothing. But the tapping continued, slow, deliberate, like fingers drumming on metal. Finally, gathering every ounce of courage I had, I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The car sat there in the dark, still, silent, but the windshield was fogged up, as if someone was sitting inside, breathing heavily against the glass. I stumbled back, my chest tightening. I didn't want to look again, but I couldn't help myself. I pulled the curtain wider. This time, I saw them. Handprints, fresh ones, spreading across the inside of the glass. Dozens of them, pressing against the windshield, the windows, the back seat. Small ones, large ones, overlapping each other, moving slowly as if tracing invisible patterns. My body froze. I couldn't breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The handprints faded, the glass cleared, and the car sat there, perfectly normal under the dim light of the street lamp. I told myself I was hallucinating, that stress and exhaustion were making me see things. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't over. The next night, things got worse. I was lying in bed when I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my room. Slow, heavy ones, dragging slightly, as if bare feet were sliding against the floor. I held my breath, staring at the door. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a moment, there was silence. Then, tap, 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 3 soft knocks on the door. I didn't move. My throat was dry, my hands trembling against the sheets. Then I heard it, a faint voice, a child's whisper. "Let me in." Every muscle in my body locked. The words were soft, almost pleading, but there was something wrong about them. The tone wasn't human. It was flat, hollow, like the sound of an old recording. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. After a few seconds, the whisper stopped. The footsteps began again, moving slowly down the hall, fading into silence. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. By the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I needed to get rid of the car. Maybe it was stupid, maybe it wouldn't change anything, but I couldn't stand the thought of it sitting in my driveway any longer. I drove it out to an empty lot on the edge of town and left it there with the keys inside. As I walked away, I swear I felt the air grow colder, heavier, like the car was watching me leave. For the first time in days, I slept peacefully that night. No footsteps, no whispers. The house was silent, but the peace didn't last. The next morning I woke up and went outside. The car was back in the driveway. I stood there, frozen, staring at it. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. I checked the street, the neighbors, nothing. Nobody could have driven it back, and yet there it was, parked exactly where it had always been. And this time, the windows weren't just fogged, they were covered, handprints smeared across every inch of glass, inside and out. Small ones, large ones, overlapping in frantic patterns. And pressed against the driver's side window, clear as day, was a single face print. A child's face, mouth open, eyes wide, staring straight into the house. That was the last night I ever stayed there. I packed my things and left town the next day, abandoning the house, the car, everything. To this day, I don't know what followed me home on that night drive, and I don't want to find out. I've always liked driving at night. Something about the quiet roads, the empty stretches of land, and the way the world feels different when most people are asleep. It's calm, peaceful. At least, that's what I used to think. One night, everything changed. I had stayed late at a friend's house, and by the time I left, it was already close to midnight. The drive home wasn't anything new to me. I'd done it dozens of times before. It's mostly back roads, the kind that snake through miles of farmland and patches of woods. No gas stations, no streetlights, no houses. Just blacktop cutting through the dark. When I pulled onto the road that night, I noticed a low fog spreading over the fields. It wasn't heavy enough to make me slow down, but it was enough to make the world feel muted, like I was driving through a dream. My headlights stretched out ahead of me, pale beams swallowed by the haze. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint rattle of my old car as I pushed the speedometer just above the limit. At first, it was almost relaxing. I even cracked the window, letting the cold air drift in while I enjoyed the silence. But then, maybe 15 or 20 minutes in, I saw something that made me tighten my grip on the wheel. There was a figure standing on the side of the road. It came into view slowly, almost hidden by the mist, but there was no mistaking it. A human shape, motionless, facing my car. My first thought was that maybe someone's car had broken down and they were waiting for help. But as I got closer, I couldn't make out any details. No face, no clothing, nothing. Just the outline of a person, black against the fog. Instinctively, I drifted to the opposite side of the road, giving it as much distance as I could without driving into the ditch. My chest felt tight, and as I passed, I forced myself to glance out the window. Nothing was there, just a patch of grass and rolling fog. I let out a shaky laugh, telling myself I must have been seeing things. Maybe a mailbox or a fence post had tricked my eyes. It was late, after all, and I was tired. I turned the radio on, letting some static-filled station play softly, just to break the silence. I focused on the road, trying to put the weird moment behind me, but 5 minutes later, I saw it again. The same shape. Standing in the mist on the shoulder of the road, facing me, still as stone. My whole body went cold. This time, I didn't slow down. I pressed harder on the gas, staring straight ahead, refusing to look out the window as I passed. My heart hammered in my chest. Once could be a trick of the eyes, twice was something else. I drove faster, my eyes flicking from the road to the edges of the fog, scanning for any sign of movement. And then I noticed something that nearly made me lose control of the car. Every time my headlights curved around a bend, I saw it. Always in the distance, always standing at the edge of the road. No matter how many turns I made, no matter how far I drove, it was there, watching me, waiting for me. It never got closer, but it never disappeared either. It was like it was keeping the same distance, always ahead, always waiting. My mouth had gone dry. I tried to convince myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was some kind of trick with the fog and the headlights. Maybe I was more tired than I realized, and my brain was playing games with me. But the longer it went on, the less I believed that. I gripped the wheel tighter and leaned forward, urging the car faster. My knuckles were white. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I finally saw the turnoff to my neighborhood. Relief hit me so hard, I nearly sobbed. I pulled into my driveway like a man escaping a nightmare. My hands were trembling on the wheel as I shifted into park. For a long moment, I just sat there in the dark, breathing hard, telling myself it was over. Finally, I turned off the engine. The sudden silence made my ears ring. I gathered the courage to glance into the rearview mirror, just to prove to myself I was being paranoid. And that's when I saw it. At the end of the driveway, half hidden in the mist, the figure was standing there, perfectly still, watching me. I didn't sleep that night. In fact, I don't think I've had a truly peaceful night since. Because deep down, I know what I saw wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't my tired eyes. It was real. I've been a truck driver for more than 10 years. You'd think by now I'd be numb to the strange things that come with driving across the country at night. The endless dark highways, the empty rest stops, even the occasional oddball you cross paths with. But there's one night I'll never forget. It happened up in the mountains, and to this day, I still get chills just thinking about it. The route itself was quiet. No towns, no gas stations, not even the glow of distant farmhouses. Just the winding road through thick forest. I was several hours into the drive, nothing but pine trees on both sides, and my high beams cutting tunnels through the dark. The CB was dead, and my phone had no service. It was the kind of night where you start to feel like the last person alive on Earth. Then I noticed it, headlights behind me. At first, I thought nothing of it. Cars show up eventually, even in the middle of nowhere. But after a few minutes, I realized this car wasn't acting normal. It stayed back at the same distance, neither passing nor falling away. On tight turns, it hugged the road with me. On long climbs, it adjusted speed perfectly. I slowed down a little, giving it the chance to pass. The car slowed too. I sped back up, and it did the same. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. After nearly 30 minutes of this, I pulled into a gravel turnout. Just a small rest area, barely big enough for a truck and a picnic table, under a crooked lamppost. The second I pulled in, the car pulled in too, but it didn't come close. It stopped right at the entrance, headlights pointed straight at me. I sat in my cab and stared at the mirror, trying to make out who was inside. I couldn't see anything, just the blinding white beams. They didn't move. They didn't turn off the engine. They just waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I kept telling myself maybe it was just another driver taking a break, but my gut knew better. Something was wrong. I finally decided to get out and see what they wanted. I opened my door and started climbing down the steps. The instant my boots hit the gravel, the car's headlights shut off. Everything went black. The silence was so heavy it felt like my ears were ringing. And then came the sound. Crunch, crunch. Slow footsteps in the gravel, not from the car, but from the tree line behind the turnout. I froze where I stood, eyes straining in the dark. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my chest. 2 figures stepped out from the trees. At first, they were just shadows against shadows, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw enough to know they weren't hikers. They moved low and careful, keeping to the edges of the lot like they didn't want to be seen. One of them crouched near the rear wheels of my trailer. The other hung back, scanning the lot like a lookout. Then I saw the first one pull something long and thin out of a bag. In the faint glow from the truck's dash lights, the metal gleamed. A crowbar, maybe a pipe. That's when it hit me. They were going for the cargo doors. I scrambled back into the cab and slammed the locks down. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the handle. I didn't think. I just acted. I slammed both palms on the horn, blasting the air horn so loud it shook the mountain walls. The reaction was instant. Both men bolted like deer caught in a spotlight, sprinting back toward the trees. At that same moment, the car's headlights snapped back on. The engine roared, tires squealed against the gravel, and the car shot off down the highway at full speed. I sat there frozen, gripping the wheel, trying to calm down. The entire pullout was silent again, except for the faint ringing in my ears from the horn. I didn't sleep that night. I drove until sunrise, eyes flicking to every shadow, every car in my mirrors. When I finally made it to my delivery stop, I checked the trailer. Sure enough, there were fresh scratches all around the lock mechanisms. They had been working at it. If I hadn't woken up when I did, they might have gotten it open. I told the receiver about it, and he just shook his head. "Happens more than you'd think," he said. "Apparently, cargo theft rings are more common than people realize, especially on lonely mountain routes. Crews will follow trucks for hours, waiting until the driver pulls off somewhere quiet, then strike. That thought has stuck with me ever since, because if there were 2 men I saw and 1 getaway driver in the car, how many more were there hidden in those woods? And the part that keeps me up some nights? What if they weren't just after my load?" There's something about night driving that I've always loved. The quiet roads, the way the air feels cooler when it rushes through the open window, the faint hum of the engine filling the silence. It's peaceful, almost calming. On summer nights especially, it feels like the whole world has gone to sleep except for me and the road. That night started out no different. I decided to take my mom's old sedan out for a drive. It wasn't a sports car or anything fancy, but it ran smooth, and the engine had a low, steady sound that I found comforting. The two-lane road I picked wasn't busy during the day, and at night, it was practically abandoned. Just darkness, trees on either side, and stretches of pavement illuminated only by my headlights. At first, I felt that usual sense of freedom. No one around, no noise, no obligations. Just me, the car, and the endless road. I drove with the windows down, letting the warm summer air flow in. Crickets chirped faintly somewhere in the fields, and every once in a while I caught the smell of cut grass from farms I passed. It felt safe, like nothing bad could possibly happen. But then I noticed something strange. A shape appeared up ahead, sitting right in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was just trash someone had dumped. As I got closer, though, the shape took form. I slowed the car and leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. It wasn't trash. It was a chair. A single, wooden chair, placed perfectly in the center of the lane. I pulled to a stop a few feet away, putting my hazard lights on. For some reason, I didn't drive around it right away. It was too strange, too deliberate. What was a chair doing out here, in the middle of nowhere, past midnight? It looked old, paint peeling, one of the legs cracked, like something you'd find in a basement or thrown out on the curb. The whole thing made me uneasy, but curiosity pulled me out of the car. The night air was heavier now, sticky and damp, almost like it was clinging to my skin. I could still hear the faint ticking of the engine cooling as I approached the chair. Up close, it looked worse. Splintered wood, warped from moisture, smelling faintly of mildew. I told myself it was probably just a prank. Teenagers, maybe, dragging junk out here to freak out anyone driving through. But as I reached out and touched the back of the chair, I noticed how cold and wet it felt. Too wet, like it had just been washed or left in water. That's when I heard it. A sharp crack of a twig breaking in the woods beside the road. I froze instantly, hands still resting on the chair. My eyes darted to the tree line. At first, I saw nothing, just shadows and branches swaying gently in the breeze. But then another sound came. Footsteps. Slow, heavy ones, moving through leaves and dirt. And then they stepped out. Not one person, but three. They emerged from the trees like they'd been waiting there all along. Their movements were unsteady but purposeful, their faces hidden in shadow at first. I felt my stomach drop as the realization hit me. They were coming toward me. I stumbled back, my pulse pounding in my ears. As the headlights caught their faces, I wished they hadn't. Their skin was pale, stretched tight, with dark smudges across their cheeks like bruises or dried mud. Their clothes were torn, hanging off them in shreds, and their hair looked matted, like it hadn't been washed in weeks. But it was their eyes that froze me. Wide, glassy, and unblinking, fixed entirely on me. The three of them started walking faster, their bodies jerking unnaturally with every step, until suddenly they broke into a run. I sprinted back to my car, heart hammering, and dove inside just as one of them reached the headlights. His face came into view for a split second, mouth hanging open like he was trying to breathe but couldn't, eyes bloodshot, veins bulging at his temples. I slammed the door shut and locked it as the others closed in. The first one reached the passenger side and smashed his hands against the window with a loud thud. I screamed and turned the key, engine roaring back to life. Another one grabbed the back door handle, yanking so hard the whole car shook. Their hands smeared dark streaks against the glass, leaving muddy, wet marks. I didn't think, I just floored it. The tires screeched, the chair scraped under the bumper as I swerved around it, and I shot down the road as fast as the car would go. For a moment, I thought it was over, but when I glanced into the rearview mirror, my blood ran cold. They were still running, all three of them sprinting down the road, impossibly fast. Their pale figures grew smaller and smaller in the mirror, but they didn't stop. They didn't slow down. They just kept chasing, arms flailing unnaturally, their mouths opening and closing like broken machines. I didn't let off the gas until I was back in town, under the safety of streetlights. My chest hurt from breathing so hard, and my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for what felt like forever, too scared to even get out. When I finally forced myself to step out and check the car, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Handprints. They were smeared all along the trunk and the back doors, dark, wet, and streaked with mud. Some were small, others larger, all pressed against the car like someone had been holding on. The worst part? They trailed off toward the back bumper, as if something had been dragging along behind me the whole way home.